Tuesday, December 17th, Westwood School Committee meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd like to thank Westwood Media Center for live streaming this meeting and for all of their support in 2024. We appreciate it. And now I will hand it over to Tim.
Sure, thank you very much. And I also want to thank the Westwood Public Library for hosting us today. You'll notice we're not in our typical place because there is a choral concert going on over at the high school simultaneously. So just as we start this evening, I wanted to share just some pictures from around WPS. So we just recently had Thanksgiving, so our elementary schools produced some gratitude turkeys, just kids talking about what they're thankful for within the school, some great pictures around that. As well as, sorry, excuse me one second. This is from the, actually this slide is a little bit out of order, but let me come back to that in a second. So I wanted to also, as I mentioned, it's concert time, so 7th and 8th grade band concert, 5th and 6th grade band concert. We had the strings concert, there was a choral concert last night, another choral concert tonight, so certainly happy to see our kids up on stage and performing. In addition to that, just a fun little thing, the class of 2004 recently had their 20-year reunion at Neroli, so this picture came our way, so we thought we would give them a little shout out there. Also, a number of us attended the Metco Directors Association conference. It was last week, or the days all kind of blend together, I guess 2 Fridays ago. It was the 40th anniversary Metco Directors Association conference. The theme was Still Worth the Ride. Our own Latifah Frank, who was not able to be there in person, unfortunately, but delivered a great video message framing the conference. But I also want to particularly highlight our WHS senior, Gabrielle Bernardo, who was addressed the entire audience on both days of the conference about her experience in her schools and why, in her estimation, the Metco experience is, in fact, still worth the ride. So she did a phenomenal job, and certainly we are all proud of that experience. I do want to actually go back to this slide first, and then I will come back. So as part of our Inclusive Schools Week, we held our first annual diversity dinner. This was over at Sheehan. And that was immediately followed by our Conversation with Caregivers event. So these are some of the members of our community that attended. And then this was part of our Conversation with Caregivers immediately following. I want to give a shout out to Latifah Frank and Kristen Sheehan and Donna Tobin for their work in putting this together. It was a wonderful event and really speaks to how we really value the belonging for everybody in the district as we move forward. On top of that, just regarding Inclusive Schools Week, I know there's a message that went out to families on December 2nd talking about the work that we were doing across the district. From preschool students reading the book, My Voice is a Trumpet, to the diversity dinner that elementary parents were invited to the Parent Guardian Read Aloud series that will be happening for thematic books, to the Mosaic Tiles at Thurston, to the presentation from guest speaker Bill Deering at the high school, and I unfortunately was not able to participate because I was tied up, but we had not only we have a unified versus varsity basketball game, but we had a unified versus faculty kickball game that was a great experience, is certainly what I heard. So just some great things happening around WPS that I wanted to highlight as part of the superintendent's report. I actually do want, just as another cool thing, I'm going to invite Steve Boulette, our Director of Technology, Innovation, and Learning, up to the mic to talk about recent experience our students had at being a focus group for Google.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to share, we had a really interesting experience about a month ago. I was contacted by Google they requested to come in and do a focus group in one of our high school science classes. So Andrew Miller graciously offered to give up his anatomy and physiology class. And they held a focus group to basically test. There's no one better to get feedback from than our students. They are very honest. And so there were like 6 Googlers that came, product development, whatnot, and it's an AI tool that they're under strict non-disclosure, so I can't say too much, but I will say that they are creating a product that shows quite a bit of promise. That's artificial intelligence that will be essentially baked into Google Classroom with a lot of safeguards and controls. That's one of the reasons why I think it's a really good product. And probably the best reason is that the students were actually quite responded quite favorably when they saw the product and demoed it. And I should also mention, this is probably the best part about the visit, was that the Googlers were just so impressed by the students. They have been to many schools, and they said that the focus, attention, and engagement and feedback was second to none compared to any other schools that they've been to. So I really do want to give a shout out to the students for how they participated in the focus group. So I just wanted to share that. It was a really good experience, and hopefully this product will become available, I would think perhaps beginning of next school year. So.
That's awesome. Thank you, Steve, for sharing
Thanks,
that.
Steve.
Thank you for giving our students that opportunity. And then just about the last thing under the superintendent's report. So we are very pleased to have our Westwood High School girls cross country team, the first ever Westwood girls cross country team state champion, so winning the Division II state championship a couple of weeks ago. So congratulations to all of you. Along with coaches Jen Sheehan and Christy McKinney. But what we're going to do is I'm actually going to invite you all to come up individually. I'm going to come up to this mic. I'm going to read your names. I will have you come up, shake hands with Amanda as the chair of the school committee, and then we'll do one picture with everybody in the committee together right at the end. So I'll actually do this from up. I'll join you up there if that works. Yeah. So we'll start with Rachel Botello. Who could not be here, but we want to, sorry, that's what the X means on the list, so thank you for that. My apologies. You know, it's a good thing that you do this for me ahead of time. Thank you, Harley. But I do want to recognize those that are not able to be here. So Rachel Botello not able to be here. Haley Cashman, who is in the top 7. Kiara Chi, also in the top 7. Violet Gavin is not able to be here tonight, but congratulations to Violet. Maeve Gavin, who is also in the top 7. Ann Kelleher, who is a senior captain. Adrian Kelly. Delia Kelly, who is top 7 and a senior captain. Abigail Laws, unfortunately, not able to be here tonight, but congratulations to Abigail. Olivia Lee, who is not able to be here tonight because she's playing in the pit for the chorus concert as we speak. Congratulations to Olivia. Coco Murphy, unfortunately, not able to be here tonight, but congratulations to Coco. Leela Niedringhaus. Taya Pagnotti, congratulations to Taya, also top 7. Sophia Perlovsky, unfortunately not able to be here tonight. Molly Roach. Susanna Rockers. Top 7. Cara Sullivan, also top 7. Congratulations. And then Caitlin Tignor, who's not able to be here tonight. So. Congratulations to all the members of our state champion girls cross country team. Steve in the back. So.
Sorority squad?
No, stay, because there's no parents staying on that. Yeah, just because Harley says go doesn't mean we jump, so.
Perfect.
Awesome, congratulations.
That is exciting.
And while you are all welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, there is no obligation that you have to do so.
Rest up.
Thank you guys so much for the recognition.
Thank you all.
for coming.
Congrats again.
Congrats.
Congrats.
Where's Liz?
Bye. Good to see you guys.
Oh, yeah, it does look like her. Fourth from the right?
So just one final note that is not, I should just give that 1 second. So one final note, just while we're in the area of athletics, I do want to recognize our athletic director, Matt Gillis, as well too. Matt has announced that he is retiring at the end of this year. So we'll be going through a process to bring on board a new athletic director. I want to recognize this is a very public-facing position. And so before we put out a job description, we're going to be holding a community forum on January 7th. We'll put out the information about that out to members of the community to get input about what they're looking for from the athletic director position before we put out the posting. The goal is ideally to be able to identify a candidate by the time we break for February vacation. So there's some ability to do some transition as we move forward. But more information will come out about that in the near future. And with that, that ends the superintendent report, unless there's any comments from anybody on the committee.
No? All right. So now we'll open the floor to public participation. If there's any members of the community that would like to address the committee, feel free to come up and share your name and address, please. Anybody? No? Okay, we'll close public participation. And we'll move on to chair updates and liaison reports. I don't have much in terms of a chair update, just that we have our next school committee office hours scheduled for January 10th at 10 a.m. And Joanna French and Tony Mullen will be the school committee reps there along with district leadership. So thank you both for doing that. And I know Harley will send something out to the broader community after the first, so people can register. And I don't know if there are other liaison reports.
I have a solar project update.
Great.
So Dory and I attended the planning board meeting a few weeks ago, I can't remember when. And on the agenda was the planning board vote for approving the permit modification for the solar project. So we discussed, the situation with the planning board, and ultimately the planning board approved the modification, with the sort of resolution of the issue is Amoresco donated $6,000 to the tree gift fund. Is that what it's
Conservation gift fund.
Conservation gift fund, which we will draw on to purchase, or hopefully around 5 trees. I also attended the select board meeting this past week, or maybe last week, and requested an additional amount from the conservation gift fund to purchase an additional 5 trees. So all in, hopefully we'll be able to replant about 10 trees on or around the high school property. Clearly not in the area we're planning to do the canopy, but and this is to replace the trees that have been removed over, since the initiation of the permit for the high school project. So that was a resolution that we came to. It was, collaboration between the select board, the planning board, the school committee. And because of that, Amoresco is able to move forward with the project, and we hopefully will have construction performed and completed this summer and get those solar canopies up. So just wanted to give that little update.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for all of the time that you put into seeing this project through. I know.
It's really Lemma and Tim.
I
and
think, yeah,
also-
thank you, everybody. Lemma, you know, it was certainly a team effort, and I just think it's such a win, not just for the high school and WPS, but for the greater community at large. So it's really exciting.
It's gonna get the town much closer to its sustainability goals. It's a big project, so that's a huge win.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Anybody else?
I'll give just a quick update. I attended my first WEAC meeting as their school committee liaison, which was great to sort of be part of that and hear, you know, what they were discussing. There were folks from planning board and select board there as well. The one sort of push that I would say that they're reminding folks right now is as you are discarding your stringed lights that they should not go in recycling. They are doing collections at the libraries and both libraries and I believe at town hall. So they wanted a big plug for that because it's been part of this what's catching in our recycling sort of sorting. Yes, thank you. And I don't know, Kevin, did you want to give an update about the legislative council?
Yeah, I think, are you talking about the bell schedule change?
Yeah, just any of the initiatives that we've been discussing.
One of the proposed initiatives we've been thinking about is moving the announcement times to, earlier in the day. Announcements are slated for 5 minutes on like the bell schedule. We're thinking about moving them in between first and second block. And by doing this, we would hope that we would give students an opportunity to potentially go to breakfast. And our thought was that, you know, generally in the beginning of the day, that's when people are supposed to go to breakfast, but, you know, maybe their buses are late or some other circumstances and they can't make it. And we thought that moving the announcements in between first and second block with an extra 5 minutes of buffer time would give some students opportunities to go down, you know, get their breakfast, and, you know, I've heard it tastes pretty good, so I think I'd certainly be one of them to go down and visit. I think one of the issues, though, we ran into is whether it would count towards the minimum number of minutes needed for the school year. Though I think currently the 5 minutes does count. We're not sure if by moving it in between first and second block it would continue to count, but I think we're going to talk with Davenport and other administration about that.
That's great.
Good dynamic conversation yesterday to try to work through.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else? No? Okay. I'll pass it back to you, Tim.
Sure, thanks. So the next item on the agenda is just an update on the FY26 budget. There's no formal slides related to this today. We continue in our development process, and the expectation is that at our January 16th meeting, we'll be presenting our proposed FY26 budget to the committee and to the public at that point in time, with the ultimate public budget hearing and vote to take place at our February meeting. In terms of, and I should mention as well, we continue to meet with budget steering with the select board chair, Amanda and I, along with the select board chair, the finance committee chair, as we do each year. In terms of today, what we're looking for is just some direction from the committee about a couple things regarding revenue that we can generate on our own side. So there are really two types of fees that we generate as a district. One are fees for self-sustaining programs, things that are designed not to impact the operating budget. I would put three things in those categories. That's extended day, that is the Prodigy instrumental program, and that is building use. So none of those are designed to have any operating budget impact at all. The other fees that we generate are those that are really offset for things that there is a budgetary impact, which are preschool tuition, transportation, and I always forget the third one.
Athletic fees.
Athletic fees, thank you. So just to frame that, on that second category, we established last year a plan that we would do a 3% escalator on those fees, athletics, preschool tuition, and transportation, unless the committee wanted to entertain something that was a larger increase, or a larger or smaller increase than that. But we're using that as a baseline set of assumptions. And the other categories, though, because we had, I know some of the past was that we inherited some situations where our fees were not self-sustaining, so we had to do some fee increases. I know particular in some other areas, looking at sort of what market rates are, we look at that market rate adjustment as well too. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lemma to sort of talk about our approach to fee structures this year, not just for this year, but potentially build something out for a couple of years to help address not just self-sustaining, but potentially as a revenue-generating avenue down the road as well. So with that, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. So as Tim said, I've actually spent some time thinking about specifically the self-sustaining programs as the first portion of this conversation with the school committee. And in a memo that I've shared with you, I've proposed that we map out potentially fees for all three of these areas for the next 3 years. And I recommend that just because we do get busy, and I feel that circumstances sometimes do change, but the school committee is always, has the ability to come back and revisit existing fee structures. But we are currently without any guidance from the committee for tuition for extended day for next school year, also for building use rates for the next school year, and prodigy tuition and pay rates for the next school year. So those are the ones that I address in my memo. I can speak to some of this. So as you learned in the memo, the extended day program is still a very strongly reputed, well-loved program in the Westwood schools. There's a sizable wait list, over 100 students still today. The current tuition is $540 a month. My proposal here would be to increase it next year to about $590 or $597, I think, $592 per month. That is a 9.7% increase. In the memo, I speak to some of the reasons for that. We are seeing fiscal pressure. So the program is expected to break even, but barely break even this fiscal year. I looked at what the dynamics were that explain that, because I've been trying to get it to be viable and self-sustaining. That is our goal in all of these programs. The challenge with extended day, it's kind of a good problem, is that we've been able to retain more staff, partly by significantly improving the pay rates there. So when you retain the staff, they're eligible for a step increase. We did set up a pay structure that allows for a step increase as well as a COLA. So that's putting a little bit more pressure on the program. The other piece that I talked to Michael Fagone about is that he hasn't been able to expand enrollment. In fact, he's feeling pressure, space pressure specifically. So it's not so much the staffing of the program, but the use of key spaces, cafeterias, gyms in particular, and some outdoor play spaces. But I would say cafeterias and gyms for the winter months are absolutely critical for operating that program. It's not the type of program that's easy to operate in classrooms, and students need movement breaks. So that's the bottom line there. Without an ability to increase enrollment, it's hard to cover some of the fixed costs that are there. So those are the key challenges that I would note. Because we have this fiscal pressure, we're not able to be nimble and potentially hire additional behavioral staff if we need that. We're currently well-staffed, so I'm not worried for this year, but that's an opportunity that if fees increased, we would have more flexibility to do that. We do have a nurse now within the program, so we're breaking even with the nurse on staff. But this is just for staffing context. And I would say the operating budget does have an offset from extended day that was increased in the years prior to FY23, but it has not been increased since then. We have been using those funds, so we use it to defray costs for custodian, for some maintenance like repair expenses, and some business office support, and like $7,000 in utilities, which is like nominal. But that's what we've covered in the last year, for example, in the offset. For comparative costs, we are seeing that we are still well priced in the market. There are programs that are charging less than $540 a month, Franklin, Norwood, Ashland, Natick, but those are proposing to increase. We don't know how much they will increase. It was interesting to observe that Natick, which was priced low at $481 per month, had a very large enrollment. We were wondering how they were sustaining that large of an enrollment, but they've actually found that it's problematic. These were the things that we were observing ourselves when our program expanded. And so Natick has pulled back and now, significantly reduced the program from 700 students back down to 500. We do have other communities in the tech districts, Medfield, Needham, Dover, Sherburne, and Wayland. They all are priced between $650 and $680 or $690. per month. So they are over where we are. So for this first one, I would say, my recommendation was a 9.7% increase and going to the $592 per month tuition in year one, but also implementing that same level of increase in the next 2 years. And this is, I would welcome questions around this so that if we need to bring back more information in January, we can do that and we can discuss that proposal much more substantively. I don't know if you want me to pause here, talk about that, or I could go to the
it may be
others.
good to pause there. I do just want, for clarity for the committee, we're not looking for any kind of action from the committee tonight. We're just looking for some direction and guidance. We would do any kind of fee recommendation vote as part of the overall budget process in February, just for some timing around these decisions. So.
I do have a question. It sounds like part of the problem is space, right? These larger spaces that are being used by other groups. What is our sort of process around charging fees for using those spaces so that some of that could, go to defray the 9.7?
I think our policy has been that any group, so there's actually, I go into that in the next piece, but there are tiers for
Right.
building use.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a tier 1 category, and we've included anything that's school related, town related, as well as PTO sponsored in tier 1. So for example, PTO mini courses, we don't charge any fees for. We just consider them, part of the school school activities. For tier 2 and above, we do charge fees. But the space competition, I wouldn't allow any non-tier 1 activities to bump extended day. I just want to say that clearly. Like, we've prioritized extended day as much as possible. It's only when it directly benefits our students, or these are programs for our students. So mini courses benefiting our students have gotten space, and they've shared. They collaborate well together, but we're just acknowledging that there's a space crunch. At the Pine Hill, there's been so much demand because our athletic programs also want to use the Pine Hill gym, which is a regulation-sized gym. It's been really helpful to have that available for the athletic programs. So they're sharing that space. And Extended Day has been using some of the extended learning areas, which are really great too. But Michael Fagum shared that he didn't anticipate the kids would be so disappointed to lose the gym, but they were disappointed. The kinds of activities you can do in an extended learning space aren't the same as what you can implement in a gym for movement and play, and it's just more fun in the gym. And so that felt like a loss for them.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Along those lines, so is it that basketball needs the space at Pine Hill, or it's like a nice to have because it's such a great gym?
My understanding is that we used to use the high school
Right.
for all of the basketball practices, but that some of the programs, the JV and the freshman team, were practicing late in the evening. And so we looked at that, and there was an opportunity to allow them to practice earlier so that they can get home earlier. And it was hard. This really does become just about, all of them are our students, and we want to try
Right.
to make sure everybody gets what they need. So we thought the extended learning area for Extended Day was a good, alternative space for them to use. And they haven't been bumped every day from the gyms. It's just that they're sharing it for a couple of hours in the afternoon. So.
I'll just add related to that, right? So because you've got multiple levels of basketball, you've got boys and girls basketball. And one of the things is when the decision was made to go to a later start time, it pushed back all the practice times more.
That's true.
And so that was now pushing into place later in the evening where we're uncomfortable with the impact on students
Right.
practicing that late in the evening. So we're looking to offset some of that by using the Pine Hill gym.
Yeah. So that,
So can I ask more
Yep.
questions? So if you do 9.7, will you be able to get some money for offset in the out years? I understand this year you think it's going to maybe just cover marginal costs, additional staff, additional
yep.
staff. But
I have-
eventually, presumably, you're going to be able to get additional offset out of that, I assume?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I see. I actually think we would get it, not in FY26, but in FY27, if we kept at that pace. One question is like how much we expand support staff, like behavioral staff. But if we're staffed exactly as we are today, then in FY27, we would be able to increase the offset.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Tony, like when we talk about what the impact, it is self-sustaining in and of itself, but there are all kinds of administrative functions that are performed. So for obviously Lemma's time, Chantel's time as the HR director with a number of people that come in and out into that position, are utilities that Lemma's already done. So all those things are potential offsets that could be, all those things are potential impacts that could be offset by revenue generation out of that program.
Yeah, I guess it'd be interesting to maybe look at a scenario. So we haven't done an offset in 3 years. So if you were to just say, if we had done that 4% or whatever the number is over the last 3 years, what would that be now? It'd be interesting to see if we took the offset, basically increased the fee more this year and then did it less in the down years to get the offset
Like
this
do
year. I
like
don't know.
a 12 or
12% this year and
year
6 or whatever.
Offset, yeah.
Just as a scenario, I don't know. I don't know what the overall budget picture looks like this year. I don't think it's going to be great. So it just might be interesting to look at that scenario for us to consider, because we could then, as opposed to net 10, 10, 10, okay, oh, this year's going to be a little worse, but then it's going to be
Yeah.
marginal cost.
And sort of piggybacking off of that, I'd love to, I know that we only, do 3-year lookouts, but I really would love to be in a position where if we have to, and I think we should, we increase it every single year, right? Because we were in this position probably 6 years ago where we did a massive bump up because we hadn't been increasing it for years. And I feel like we're sort of back there again. So I would rather, do sort of a larger bump this year to get us back to where we would have been if we had been doing bumps. And then sort of have, steady, to the extent we can predict it. Like if inflation goes through the roof again, clearly that might affect it and we could revisit it. But just sort of consistently say every single year we're going to increase it by a certain percentage. And whether it's COLA or whether it's whatever it is. But I do think that if we have that in place, then we can avoid this sort of like,
That's
catch
kind
up.
of the model
Right.
that we established with athletic fees or other
Yes.
fees, just to have a minimum, like
Yeah.
a default if the school
a
committee
default
doesn't determine
increase,
something
and
else.
then which we can tweak depending on, the economic conditions.
My other comment to Amanda's point is, it's really not for this committee. I think some governance on space might be in order. In other words, if space is free to the athletic department, they're going to say, well, we'll send everyone to Pine Hill. I presume there were times they were going to Thurston and practicing. It's not just a start time issue. And so I'm presuming there is, it's a great gym. It is a great gym, but I don't know, there's some
Yeah,
type of governance.
yeah.
It's really not a school committee decision,
No, I
but
would say those are conversations that we
Yeah.
had prior to
Yeah.
implementation
Okay.
this year as we were looking at sort of all the various options that were out there.
because they used to use Thurston. I know that's, so.
I think there's open gym
Yeah.
now for the middle school students
Yeah,
at
okay.
Thurston, on
Yeah.
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah.
But
They have 2 gyms.
Our gyms
Yeah.
are in high demand. It was,
Yeah.
I mean, as Tim was alluding, we spent some hours trying to haggle about the schedule and who
Yeah.
could go where. It's worth the time because ultimately, there is a payoff in getting it right, so.
And maybe, with the new AD coming in, this could be sort of an opportunity to sort of revisit the program and figure out what makes sense.
yeah, it seems to me before the issue was that we've talked through this, we were significantly undercharging, and so we had a lot of market demand because we were very affordable.
Your
And
extended
now-
day. you're talking
Extended
about.
day, correct. And now it seems like we still have that demand, even though we've increased our prices, but we still don't have the capacity to increase enrollment based on space.
Yeah.
So it's a different problem than we saw a couple of years ago.
Yep.
I also don't think we're quite at market, right?
No, I don't think it doesn't seem like it relative
Yeah.
to our peers. But
Yeah, so there's something
there's
to think
another
about.
consideration that we kind of knew before, but it was secondary to the cost.
To the cost, yeah.
So I would say what I'm hearing, and I really appreciate, because this is exactly the kind of directional conversation that we're looking for out of this conversation this evening. So what I'm hearing is an appetite for looking at potentially having a more sizable increase for FY26, but then establishing a policy, or I don't say policy because that's got a different connotation, a protocol or a practice moving forward about how we look at these rates. Okay. I know Lemma's going to talk about the other two. I think my default assumption about the other two will probably be a similar response from the committee, unless you share something with me otherwise. But it sounds like what would be good practice there would probably be good practice for the others, but I'll let Lemma kind of provide the context on those first.
Yeah, so in building use, there is a parallel in the sense that we had a long run of not adjusting these rates, and it got to a place where we were so far away from what was charged in the market and what was honestly the impact that organizations using our building has on us as a school district. it was quite significant. So we did adjust and create a rate structure for FY23 through FY25 that ends this year. So we're looking for guidance for how to charge in FY26. But again, I'm proposing maybe we lay this out for the next 3 years. You may give me you may suggest that we actually implement a protocol for how to move forward in perpetuity, like that there should always be a model for doing this. So the grid that I shared is preliminary, like, fees, rental fees for the use of space, as well as event fees. It is very, I can see some of you squinting. Sorry that it's small. We can give you better formats on that next time around. But the bottom line I just want to say is we went through these numbers and looked at the percent impact. I mean, what's really the delta between one year and the next, and how much our organization's paying. And it's between a 5 and 7% delta. It's more the tier 4 organizations that are experiencing a 7%, but it's a little bit based on the space. The difference is based on space. I would say in looking at this grid, there are a lot of numbers here to review. What I specifically focused on are the fees that our users currently really pay. Because there's a lot of fees here that no one actually ever pays. It's because we don't happen to have a tier 3 organization that ever rents a library at an elementary school. And so it's almost irrelevant until it becomes a thing. But we have some heavy demand in specific areas. It's the gyms, certainly, the regulation gyms, as well as the non-regulation gyms, elementary and middle school gyms. And it's also in other areas such as classrooms, cafeterias, rarely bigger spaces like the little theater or the auditorium. I would say the fee increases, we've looked at them and we've thought about who are our most impacted users. So in that sense, WBA, Westwood, CYO, basketball, the Westwood Chinese School were some of the big users that we ran through this model basically to try to anticipate how would this impact them. And nobody experiences more than a 7 or 7.5% increase year over year. But that's not nothing, so it is still significant. I say that to get input from the committee about whether we're adjusting in a reasonable way and kind of catching up on the time that we have not previously adjusted these fees. In terms of offset, this offset also was adjusted between FY22 and FY23. It was last at $88,000. It pays for the coordinator of building use, who's the person who schedules all of these activities, and it pays for a little bit of business office support. But I would say that, we haven't previously been able to absorb any other costs on this because it just covers those costs, and that's about all we've been able to generate. So there's an opportunity there because there is certainly maintenance on our buildings, impacts from the use of these buildings over time, and utilities from opening them on weekends, nights and evenings and weekends. So those are the factors there. I think those are the highlights for building use. I'm open to comments and questions.
Does the offset cover custodial?
They cover, yes and no. So they cover their own custodial costs. I sort of don't count that in the offset.
Okay, got it. But that's covered, it's not coming out of the operating.
If it's a weekend custodial fee. So this is interesting because on weekdays in the evenings, if an organization tries to use our buildings and we already have a custodian on site, we don't charge them a custodian fee. That's our historical practice. Now, they do have an impact. This is why we've kind of costed that into the event fee and the rental, but we've not charged them a custodial rate. It would really up the amount that some of these organizations would pay if we tried to charge them for our custodial time, and it would be hard to say which hour is really dedicated to them. We treat weekends differently because our buildings would not be open otherwise, and so we're bringing in a custodian to open a building on the weekend for the staff, and so for the organizations, and so we charge the actual custodial rate for that year per contract, and it's either time and a half or double time on Sundays, and there's so much demand for our gyms that we use them on Sundays heavily, and so
So if it's a weekend event, you're charged an event fee and the custodial costs, and if
Yes.
it's a week event, you're only charged the event fee.
yes.
Yeah, to frame that, right, is we only charge the custodial fee if we have to increase custodial staffing from what we would normally have.
But doesn't the work for the custodian increase if there's an event during the week?
It does. I mean, I would say it does, and specifically for some events more than others. The best way we found to try to address that is through, number one, the rental, but then also counting on certain like layered fees, like there's a banquet fee now. So if you have 50 people and you're bringing food, there's a fee for that. Trying to address the fact that the custodian has to do a significant amount of cleanup if there's going to be food on an evening when otherwise they should be cleaning classrooms. So that allows us to staff up and bring some more support to that building if needed.
I don't know about you, I don't think I would be opposed to charging a custodial fee. It just doesn't seem right that if you're on a weekend, you would be charged more. Well, I see that we have to open the buildings, but just because the custodians are there, they're there to do the job that they're supposed to do every night, not pile onto that job.
Yeah.
You know, it just kind of seems like we're giving them more work, but we're not, I don't know, what do you guys think?
That strikes me as an imbalance as well. And I've seen some of the events in the work that the custodians have after certain events, and they have their work cut out for them, and it's more than they would otherwise have. So it does seem like an imbalance.
And I mean, on the other hand, a gym, I mean, I don't want to say I used to coach basketball. A gym, it's on a Thursday night, they close, I don't know how much actual work. It may, I'm not that there's
It
no,
depends on the event,
Right.
right?
I mean, it's a event, I guess if it's food and
Like
stuff,
if
I
it's
understand,
a-
yeah.
Like if it's a theater production
Yeah,
during
fair
the
enough,
week,
yeah, yeah.
that's, could be a lot of work,
Could be.
whereas you're right, a basketball practice, you
It's
open the
a
door.
little extra,
you
but
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, I mean, one thing we could explore is, although I will say this is open up for, it may open up the challenge with renters around this, but if the determination is made that we need to add additional custodial coverage, then we charge a fee, right? If there's an event that requires, like a banquet is a great idea, or something like that, then we charge the fee, but if we don't have to bring additional staffing on, we don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's way too messy and just opens up the door for people complaining about, I got charged a fee, but I didn't for this.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the whole goal of this is to make these spaces available to the public, but not at our own cost, right?
Correct.
All of these things. And to the extent we think that we need to charge some sort of additional fee for additional custodial support, I think that's reasonable. I think, to Tony's point, if we don't think that the custodial work increases significantly, I don't think we would need to. But the whole goal all along has been to make these available, but not at the expense of the operating budget.
I'll look at the type of activities that we have going on weekday evenings, and maybe, number one, like, look at the activity, look at the pressure that it causes, if it's just the use of the gym. I would say, I always tell our staff and facilities that don't underestimate, just the impact of opening a building for folks, because then you've got like demand on bathrooms, right? So you've got to clean them again. I know, unfortunately, from like staying late in the office, that I'm sometimes sensitive to the fact that the custodians are there and they like me out of there so they can just get the office cleaned, right? And not have to worry about somebody moving around or doing anything else. So that, I think that's a real, I'll look at the events. We'll think about whether there's a different model for doing it on weeknights, but otherwise on weekends, we do charge custodial time, so that one is like pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean, and to that end, your example, another example is, if it's a snowy or wet evening, you're schlepping in, dirt from outside after they may have already had planned, or it was part of their schedule or part of their routine to have mopped the floor already there. Now they have to either do it again or wait, or, I would be curious what facilities says about this, get
The
feedback from them.
pressures. Yep, we can have that conversation. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I
helpful.
guess I'm just a little sympathetic to tier 2 in particular.
Yeah, no, I know.
You're robbing Peter the Piper. I mean, it's fine that it's benefiting kids, and I don't know. It's the WBA can raise their fees, but I don't know. I'm just somewhat sympathetic to tier 2 if it's supporting other Westwood kids. I guess in general. I mean, I get the incremental cost if we have to bring in a custodian, but.
Yeah.
And let me ask a question. Who did we visit? Was it you and me, Dory, years ago? Were you on that committee? Anyway, we were hoping that, not hoping, we thought there might be some decreased demand. Did we see any of that? Like events saying, you know what, it's too expensive?
We
Was it
saw,
you? Yeah,
you know
it was
what, this won't surprise you, but we saw changed behavior in the sense that, so one of the things I did in the new schedule is like, there's a fee for using lobby space, because there are organizations that use our lobbies for activities. And that's partly probably because the gyms are in use, but also it's this flexible space that's available for so you can use it to serve breakfast, you can use it for ping pong, you can use it. And that's not without impact on our custodians, again, because they have to set up for that, right? So they have to move items out of the lobby or move the ping pong table into the lobby. They've got to like support that group or accommodate a table where food is being served. So we're now like pricing in something for lobby use, so that people have like adjusted and started to use spaces that are more cost effective for them. I wouldn't say that we lost a lot of organizations. The key ones have still been the key ones that continue to use our spaces. It would be interesting to see if there's more demand, though. I put the libraries, the Pine Hill Library and the high school library in particular, with what I thought might in the future have more demand for use, and there is certainly an impact on our custodial staff if those are in use, but they're nice spaces. And they are, especially the high school library, after we removed the circulation desk, is now a pretty flexible space. I worry about food in there, but for a function, it could be a very nice space. So like there are opportunities that maybe in the future groups will use. So that's it on the building use then. And then lastly, Prodigy. So the Prodigy program was founded in 1991. It's a well-loved program also, as you know, as with Extended Day, and offers after-school music lessons. I think there have been 200 students participating this year. Most of the lessons are on site in person, the bulk of them at Westwood High, some at Thurston. And the program did have a $26,000 deficit in FY23 that was due to uncollected fees. Since then, we've turned it around. So in FY24, there was a positive balance at the end of the year because we collected a lot of those past due like lesson tuitions that had not been collected in FY23. And we've tightened the processes. So the registration system, there's tighter fiscal controls. We correlate the attendance that the students have to what we're paying to the teachers and so on and so forth. So that's much tighter than where it was. But I would say it's breaking even and there's not much room there, and we do face some challenges. The stipend for the project director has not been adjusted. I say over 10 years, it might be 15. I don't know how. I mean, I think it's been a very long time that this has not moved. It's at $10,000, a little bit over. And the role was a 10-month position originally. There's a lot of demand over the summer. So effectively, the person has to work 12 months, and that's a challenge. That's something to consider. The other pieces that our instructors are paid under market. So our instructors are paid $52, $53 an hour. In Canton, Walpole, it's $55. And in other communities, it's well over. Some Wayland's $65 an hour. So we're just not paying our instructors to be competitive. And that's because our tuition doesn't allow for it. So they're both have to be really adjusted. My recommendation is a $3 increase for the tuition. That's an 8.5% increase in the first year. And then that would allow us to get to a place where we can pay the $55 an hour to match Walpole and Canton. I mean, you could go even more aggressive, but I'm trying to move in a staged way on some of these. That the first step with Prodigy would be to try to get the tuition rate the pay rate for our instructors at market, and also have enough in the account that if we need to pay the project director more, we can do so. That has to be negotiated. It's currently a WTA rate, so we don't know where that's going to land, but I'm never comfortable with these programs being like really breaking even and barely breaking even. I'd like to have a little bit more of a cushion in case there are pressures or in case there are uncollected fees or other issues that arise. So that's the reality of that. But I would say I alluded to the fact that we had a challenge with fiscal control. These programs take a good chunk of my time. That I just want to say very clearly. Even, I've spent a good amount of time this summer on Prodigy and figuring out what was happening there and why we had this pattern of not collecting our fees.
Any comments from the committee around this one?
No, I mean, I guess to that point, we talked about an extended day, but I mean, are there opportunities to have someone else run Prodigy or any? I mean, extended day I know is a bigger conversation, but it's just a question.
That's an interesting question.
I mean,
You mean a third party?
yeah, if it's so much,
Outsource it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say realistically not for next school year.
Yeah,
Right.
fair enough.
Yeah.
How common is it across districts to offer a program like this?
We saw about like 10 others that do it. I mean, they have different models though.
Sure.
And some of them are more hands-on than others. So we can provide more data on that, but I think it might be Weston where families pay the teacher directly. We process funds, we monitor attendance, we pay our instructors. So we're really operating this program as a Westwood Schools program. Some districts are much more hands-off, and it's almost an exchange of funds between the parent and the teacher, and maybe they're using the buildings for it.
Yeah, in cases like that, sometimes those are run by like a booster association, like a Friends of Music kind of thing. That's one of the vehicles that's used sometimes.
When you took a look at all the uncollected fees, did you find that it was, some of it was because people were struggling to pay? Or they just didn't? Or
I think it's a combination, honestly. There is an opportunity for a scholarship in the
That was my next
program, so we do
question.
have that,
Okay.
which is good. I honestly think we weren't doing the best job of like fiscal controls, billing in a timely way, and following up, and like communicating regularly. So these programs just don't run themselves. You have to really stay on them. And so I think that part we've improved a good amount on, and so I expect better in the coming years.
And there's, getting back to extended day, there's tuition support for that as well, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
We haven't denied any families in terms of that.
Wow.
Like families that come forward, sometimes it's hard for a family
It
to
is.
come forward is a
Right.
challenge, but anytime a family has come forward, there's always been a response.
Great.
All right, thank you. This was a really helpful conversation for us in terms of what we'll come back with in the future. So thank you for that. The next thing.
Sure.
So the next item on the agenda is policy IKFA graduation requirements and a first reading of this. So I want to frame this around our graduation requirements and the recent passage of question 2 at the ballot box in November. So before I get to what our graduation policy says, I want to provide some context around what question 2 actually does. So under Mass General Law, Chapter 69, Section 1D1, students, in addition to local graduation requirements, because we have our graduation requirements, it says 20 credits of ELA, 15 credits of math, 17 credits of science, financial literacy that we just added last year, et cetera. Students must also satisfy the requirements of the competency determination, the CD, in order to graduate from high school. The CD has been satisfied by MCAS testing, or through an appeal process, or through retests. But with the passage of question 2, future MCAS testing no longer satisfies the requirements of the competency determination. And the language of the ballot question now puts the onus on local districts to identify a process to determine that students have met the competency determination requirements by successfully completing local coursework. What I want to say related to this is, so DESE gave us an FAQ document November 6th, kind of in anticipation this might pass. There was an updated FAQ document that came to us just earlier, I guess that was last week, middle of last week. It confirmed that districts have to develop a local process, but at this point did not provide guidance on how to develop that process. Actually, I had the opportunity today to watch this morning's State Board of Ed meeting in which there was a large conversation about this. The State Board of Ed is hoping that they will identify best practices from districts to help them develop what they tell districts to do. So this is a little chicken and egg situation happening right now with DESE and local districts. But the FAQ document is clear that students in the class of 2025 and beyond can no longer earn a competency determination by attaining a qualifying score on MCAS. I will say that any students that have already earned the CD, which is the vast majority of our current students in the class of 2025, those CD requirements, that CD attainment already is fine. Students who took the MCAS last year as sophomores, who are juniors, that is fine. But students have to earn this competency determination in ELA, in math, and in science. MCAS does not go away. It will continue to be administered to students in grades 3 through 10, and students are required to take as required by state and federal law. Do you want to ask a question before I go forward?
Yeah.
Because I see the way you're looking at me, so I figured there was a question in the
Just to
offing.
clarify.
Yeah.
So is Desi saying that you can't satisfy the CD with the MCAS at all, or unless the school district determines that that is its CD test?
At all.
So we
Because-
can't even say.
Yes. Yeah, so there is some circular stuff in the FAQ, or at least apparently circular stuff in the FAQ. Districts could decide to keep the MCAS as a, and I'll talk about this in a second because our policy currently has the MCAS as a local graduation requirement. Because I think it was there because of the state CD requirement. But the state will not issue a CD based upon MCAS scores. A district cannot issue a CD based on MCAS scores because the plain letter language of question 2 says it has to be based on successfully completing local coursework. An MCAS test is not local coursework. So
Okay.
hence, it does not meet the requirement, even if the local district decided they wanted to do it. And I will say, on that point, we recently got a guidance from MASS's attorney on that particular point. So,
But just one more follow-up question to Amit. So for this class, if they already passed it, they're okay?
They're okay.
It's only if they, okay, got
yeah,
it.
yeah. And I will say, I mean, I don't want to specify a number, but it's literally one hand, the number of students in the class of 2025.
Got it.
And
But the
so,
class of 2026 took it too.
class of 2026 took it too. So let me step back for a second, right? So the way the process has worked prior to question 2, students would typically take the science MCAS their freshman year, would take the math and ELA MCAS their sophomore year. If they passed, everything was fine. If they did not reach a passing score on science, they could start taking retests in their sophomore year. There'd generally be one in, I forget, like a fall and a spring in both science, then in math and ELA. So there would be multiple opportunities to take retests. There is also, if a student did not meet a qualifying score by the retest, there was a portfolio appeal process. So you could basically submit evidence of the student's work in class to a state entity that would then certify that, and I was a grader for this a lifetime ago, like 20 years ago, that would certify that students had met the CD requirement by demonstrating their mastery of the subject matter by their coursework material. The state basically is no longer allowed to issue CDs. And this is on a future slide, but the question of whether or not there will be any retests in the future is an open question. There certainly will be no appeal process in the future because the state can't issue a CD. And so there are all kinds of other implications to these questions down. I've spent a lot of time thinking and talking about this over the last couple of weeks, particularly last week since this guidance came out. And I know the state is holding a webinar for superintendents tomorrow afternoon as well. But this is essentially the CD requirement falls strictly on local coursework. What I will acknowledge, let me just switch to the next slide here. Actually, let me not do this yet. For most students, our local coursework requirements, a student successfully completes those 4 years of ELA and the 3 years of math and the 17 credits of science, which include lab-based science, would be sufficient for us to be able to say that they've met the competency determination requirement. The place where this gets really challenging and tricky, there are a couple of scenarios. One, maybe students who have an alternative educational pathway where they may be receiving significant specialized services where their access points to the curriculum are in a different place. And so we would need to develop a process for that. That is not a current issue with the class of 2025, but I want to recognize this. The other thing is that a student who moves from out of state, for example, and this is an example that was given at the state board meeting this morning, whose science, and I think science is the easiest place to think about this, because it is not meeting any science requirement. The way the question 2 was written, you have to meet the science requirement for an MCAS subject that was tested in 2023, which is exclusively biology, chemistry, physics, or technology engineering. So a student who may come from a private school or from out of state who's passed 2 years of science in earth science and marine biology does not satisfy and who moves here as a senior, does not satisfy the competency determination requirement. And so we would need to identify a pathway for that student as well too. So this is way more complicated than I think anybody has realized that it is. And so we will probably need to revisit this once we have additional guidance. In the meantime, we have sort of a triage issue with the class of 2025 and students that maybe right now expected to sit for retest this spring, which is why I'm bringing this forward to the committee tonight. So hopefully that's some good context of a really complicated, messy situation. So the reason I bring this forward is our current policy, IKFA, and we are relatively unique to this when I talk to my colleagues, specifies that in addition to our local course requirements, students must also pass the MCAS examination in math, ELA, and science technology. One of the really just very technical things is there's no such thing actually as passing the MCAS. Students are rated as not meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, exceeding expectations. The state has established a cut score to determine the competency determination for what we've called passing. But since the state can no longer issue CDs, they'll no longer use their sadometricians to develop a cut score. So that doesn't even exist going forward. And again, as mentioned in the FAQs, although MCAS retests are being offered this spring, there is uncertainty as to whether or not the retests will continue to be offered in future years. And so with that in mind, it's my recommendation to the committee, and I want to do this with full recognition that while the state voted yes on question 2, Westwood as a community voted no on question 2. I just want to acknowledge that. I think for full, I believe in stating plain facts, so let's state plain facts. But I would still recommend the committee amend policy IKFA by striking the reference to passing MCAS tests as a local graduation requirement, because of the fact that we would have A, I don't know what passing means going forward, and B, that the opportunities for retests that have existed previously may not continue to exist in the future. I would also recommend the committee consider waiving the third reading of the policy and vote to adopt at their January meeting, because the first set of retests start in February. So the greater and more rapidly that we can give certainty to students and families prior to MCAS tests being administered this spring would be preferable. Just to show what this looks like, and that is a little bit small probably on the screen there and on the screen here. It would just be, this is the red line version of the policy, would just be striking that piece in red line there, and everything else would still stand. So the 4 years of English, the 3 years of math, the 17 credits of science, the 10 credits of social studies, 7 of wellness, all of that stuff stays the same. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions from the committee or take any direction that you have for me on this matter.
So with this change, your example of the private school student would still pass?
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. So we would need to, what we will need to do going forward.
But that wouldn't be in compliance with the state?
So what I would say is what we need to do going forward is we need to establish a process for which students will meet the competency determination. I'm not worried about that for the class of 2025 because we don't have anybody in that situation that I just outlined.
Okay.
By the time we hit the class of 2026, I anticipate we will have more guidance from the state, and we will revisit this policy to address that at that point in time.
So this is sort of the stopgap?
This is the stopgap triage to deal
Okay.
with this year.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And this is a really long-winded thing because this has gotten really, really complicated really, really fast.
So just so I'm understanding correctly, there's, for students that are expected to graduate in 2025,
Yes.
they still have the option to retest and use that as, to satisfy the graduation requirement, or do they require?
No.
They don't. So why are they retesting in the spring?
They wouldn't.
I thought you said they
Yeah,
are.
so the state is still offering it.
Okay.
The reason the state is still offering it, I think A, they've already paid for it. But B, there are some I just call it like it is, right? But I mean, B, there are certain circumstances, right? So students who are still trying to qualify for the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, students who may be using that to try to attain the seal of biliteracy, right? So the MCAS still can be used for other things. It just can't be used for the competency determination.
Okay.
So the students who were using it to get the CD, the competency determination to graduate, they probably wouldn't retest.
While I probably can't officially say that, I would say that yes.
Okay.
So I guess I did just officially say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if they met these those students, if they meet these requirements, they're good. But we're still out of compliance with the state. I guess
No. So
For 2025.
Yeah,
it's different.
for students in the class of 2025
Yeah.
that have not yet met the competency determination, our local requirements have a direct overlap with the state's requirement for obtaining the CD
Okay,
that will allow students in the class of 2025 to be all set.
okay,
I can't speak with certainty to the class of 2026, particularly because even though the November retest was after question 2 passed, it was before question 2 went into effect, which was December 5th. So students who took the retest in November can still learn the CD through the retest. That's just another layer of all this. So we'll need to look at who's in the class of 2026, but again, I would anticipate we're going to have additional guidance by then.
Okay.
And I would come with a revision to, honestly, I would probably recommend our policy make reference to something that's not a policy, so as DESE continues to change what they do, we can be, I would probably recommend it goes to like the high school program of studies. It's probably a good way of doing it because that can be more responsive on a year-by-year basis to changes than putting it explicitly in school committee policy. And honestly, if there's an appetite to do that, this is me sort of thinking on the fly, but we could bring that back in January where we say that students, a process for students meeting the competency determination requirement is satisfied by Mass General Law, Chapter 69, Section 1D/1, will be outlined in the Westwood High School Program of Studies, something like that. That way school committee reviews that when they review the program of studies, and we have a process going forward that can be responsive to state guidance, if that makes sense. And that way, I think to your point, Amanda, this conflict of are we meeting state law or are we not gets addressed through that policy revision.
Can I build on that question?
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
no, I know.
It's a little gallows humor in this
Right, it is.
conversation.
So this is our stopgap. This gets us through the year. That's fine. Do you anticipate, and I'm probably asking you something you can't predict, but do you anticipate us needing to replace this with something else or some other way of determining, or that we locally decide, but it's another evaluation of some sort, another way of?
Yeah, well, so I'll frame this in the conversation that was used at the state board meeting this morning. There is a short-term issue, there's a medium-term issue, and there's a long-term issue. The short-term issue is class of 2025, and I think what we're doing will address that.
Okay.
The medium-term issue is students that are already in high school right now, some of whom have already taken MCAS and our meetings have met CD through that. And then the long-term issue is students that are prior to that. The long-term issue, there is certainly the potential that the state legislature may make revisions that dictate something more. The State Board of Ed has the authority under the law to, and let me make sure I get the exact language here because I don't want to speak out of turn. Although I may have been speaking a little out of turn already. Because the board seemed particularly interested in this morning, and now I can't access the document, unfortunately.
It's okay. We can.
But essentially gives the board the authority to, here's the language. So districts have to certify that students satisfactorily complete coursework that has been certified by the student's district, is showing mastery of blah, 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 of the standards in areas measured by the MCAS test administered in 2023, comma, and in any additional areas determined by the board.
Okay.
So if the State Board of Education decides we now want to add additional things to the competency determination requirement, they have the ability to do so. There was conversation at the board meeting this morning about, well, why are we, MCAS is because we've just been using a test, we've only been looking at grade 10 standards, do we now need to look at grade 12 standards, and what does that mean for competency determination? Do we look at Mass Core, which I would say that is, when I think Mass Core is essentially the program of studies that students are recommended to have to go into state institutions of higher education. That has implementation issues, particularly with like small rural districts in the western part of the state, or districts that may have really aging buildings that may not be able to have lab infrastructure to do that. So there's a lot of uncertainty on that front. So the more that I think about this, the more I think basically taking this out of policy and kicking to the program of studies and referencing that in policy is probably a good way to be responsive to what may change, not just in the next 12 months, but in the next 4 to 7 years, let's say. So.
Getting back to your point about the kind of community's appetite for this, how do you think that would be impacted by moving it to the program of studies out of school committee policy?
I mean, I'm guessing that most people don't spend their weekends reading school committee policy.
Right. No, I'm thinking more in terms of like oversight.
No, I mean, I think the thing is the school committee still reviews the program of studies on an annual basis, right? So we're not removing an oversight factor from the school committee. We're just making the ability to implement changes more flexible than going through a formal 2 or 3 reading of the school committee policy.
Okay.
And certainly the school committee, if they want to have a broader discussion, can certainly raise it in a larger venue anytime they wish.
I think I'm okay with that. I would request that you bring those conversations to the committee. So, what this forces is it forces the committee to review the capital P policy with a regular basis. And if those standards change at the state level, we have to discuss, we have to approve. And that is our role, right? If it's, I don't want to say buried because that has a connotation, but I would always want you to, hey, by the way, these are the ongoing conversation, short, medium, and long-term implications of this. We're at the medium stage, and here's what the state is recommending. Now we're at the long-term stage, and here's what the state's recommending. I would just want to make sure we have a chance to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, and I think that could certainly be itemized in policy too, right? Is that the process by which students meet the competency determination shall be outlined in the Westwood High School Program of Studies. Any changes to that process shall be discussed shall be brought to the committee for discussion in open session.
Right.
Something like that, I think addresses
something
that
like
concern.
that is helpful, just so it doesn't seem to the
buried.
community.
Yeah, I'll use your word.
Or
Yeah.
fly under the radar in some way that we're not being completely transparent about these things.
That's a fair comment, absolutely.
But we see that on an annual basis, the program of studies?
Yeah, we typically do that during the summer retreat.
And those aren't amended at all throughout the year?
Program of studies is typically not amended throughout the year because it is what students use for course selection.
Right.
And that happens on an annual basis, so.
So how would that be more flexible than keeping it in the policy?
Actually, a good point.
I mean, I know this
Yeah,
requires 2 or 3 readings.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, I guess I'm not seeing the advantage of cross-referencing it, instead of just having it in the policy itself, having to go look for it somewhere else, if that's not a living document that we typically, amend frequently. That's just my
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because I see what you're saying, because if the state changed something, we would hope that they would give us enough. I know, but heads up, that we could then change the policy, but the same thing would happen with the program studies.
Yeah.
Except that we would have to wait to review it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you may be right there.
Unless there was some sort of bi-directional, agreement between the two documents, that's the only.
Yeah, and I guess to that, I mean, I'm also thinking about another provision in the FAQs, right? Like, we don't distribute the policy manual in multiple languages. I mean, people can access, like, the FAQ requirement requires that the process be outlined and be available in multiple languages. But we could certainly take this individual policy and do it in that way, or that protocol. Actually, maybe the best way to do it is MASC policy coding is we create an IKFA-R, which is a reference for policy IKFA that outlines the process that we would use. So while it's not formally policy, it sits in the policy manual as a reference document for the policy. It would still need to be brought forward to the committee related to that. That it's a little bit more transparent, I think, to that concern. It requires a conversation at the committee level. And I hope that MASC will provide some guidance on this at some point too, and
I'm just trying to figure out what problem we're trying to solve here.
I'm just trying to, basically, if we don't have enough lead time, how do we address that?
Right,
That's
but we
the problem.
could, right, I mean, we
Yeah.
could call as many, I mean, if they literally say,
Right.
you need to implement this in a month, we can call 2 meetings and waive the 3rd reading. I don't know, I don't see a real problem, and I'd rather not mess with the documents if we don't have to, just because we're all familiar with them, we know where everything is. But certainly, if the committee feels otherwise, I'm certainly open to it. It just seems, I feel like we're getting a little complicated. We're making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Welcome to this whole conversation.
I'm here.
Enough.
So I think to that point, right, that maybe,
All we need to do now is do this and prove it
Yeah.
in January, and we can,
I
to
think so.
everyone's point, we'll see what the world brings.
Yeah, let's see what the news is.
I appreciate you simplifying it at the end of the conversation, Tony, so yeah, I think that may be right, and then we'll adapt on the fly
Yeah.
afterwards.
Fair.
Tim, I was wondering, I had one other question about the budget process. Can we go back to that? I just, because we talked about stuff.
Nobody ever wants to segue back
Nobody
to budget,
does,
but I think I
nobody
appreciate it
really
here,
wants
so.
to. I just neglected to ask one question. So we talked about self-sustaining programs and those three. And Tim alluded to the fact that we kind of have guiding principles from the prior budget cycle where we had talked about a 3% increase for the other offsets. I'm just wondering if we are thinking about that for the operating budget, going forward. Do we want to stick to that 3%, or what principles, without naming like a percent, but what considerations would you want us to evaluate when thinking about specifically bus fees, athletic fees, preschool tuition? And I can just lay out there is, for example, a question about where we are as compared to market. Like that may be a really important question. There's no market for bus fees and athletic fees, but there are comps, or there are other districts and what they charge. There's a principle, we've always said that we would love to not charge anything for these services, period. And so there's that, value statement. In terms of preschool tuition, it is a tuition. That one, there is a market for, to some extent. There's like the private market, but there are also comparable, district rates. And so we can look at those. I just wanted general guidance on how we think about these if we are to deviate from the 3%, just because we will be presenting the operating budget in the next meeting, so we just need some guidance on what to assume there.
You're talking about like a COLA? Or like an inflation, tie it to inflation or something?
Or like, are you more comfortable with proceeding with a 3%, which was our prior rule of thumb, on some of these than others? Would you treat them all the same way? Is there any are there any considerations that make you, more open to increasing, the current fee for one or the other? These are the kinds of questions on my mind.
I'll say it as bluntly as I can in this regard, right? In a tight fiscal climate, does the committee have an appetite for potentially considering a fee increase larger than 3% because of pressures on the operating budget? And if so, would it be across the board for all three of those areas, athletics, transportation, preschool, or one more than another? Right? I think that's...
Yeah, and I mean, I see the preschool tuition because it's a lottery system. It's like a program for which families opt in. It's a little bit of a different model than the athletic fee and the bus fee, but bus fees and athletic fees are user fees, really. And so they have in that sense, they're similar to preschool tuition. I just wanted general, without like getting into numbers, but like general thoughts on how we should look at these.
I guess the only, and this is just my thinking, I kind of feel a little bit like there's sort of user choice in where you go to preschool and whether or not you play sports, but you have to go to school and you need a way to get there if you're not within the walker zone. Mm-hmm. And so that to me feels like something it's just a little bit different than the other two. And so that's where I would, if we had to make like a exception for something, that's where I would feel comfortable, having some wiggle room, just because it doesn't feel like something that families can make a choice about. You're required to go to school. You're not required to play sports or to go to preschool. You should, I think it's great that people do, but,
I agree with you, Dory, and I also think just in hearing from community members when we have increased the bus fees in the past, when you have multiple children that are taking the bus, then you're going to kind of feel that hit more. So I would be inclined to maybe treat that a little bit differently too.
On a bigger level, I'm always curious, I mean, my earlier question said this as much. I'm always curious where we fall as compared to similar districts of similar demographics. And where do our fees fall in relation or in comparison with them? And if we are under market isn't quite the right word, but not comparable and we're below, then I would have a bigger appetite for level setting that a little bit more and bringing that up like the 12% that you're talking about. Like if that brings us better in line with where our peers are, I think that's a fair thing to do. And I also like the strategy of let's jump ahead so that it's a big jump at first, but then we're able to kind of pull back, just so that we're not always chasing. We're not always chasing our peers, around our community.
I think I'd look at it a little bit different in that I would look at the increases based on if we can, on the estimated costs that we would incur and try and match that, right? So I've said this, like I've been saying this for years. I really feel that all of these programs should be self-sustaining. We're not in the business of and I don't want to be subsidizing, even the bus program, right? I understand that's different, but I still think that unless we make a value determination that the bus program should either be free or that we're willing to subsidize it, which I don't think we've had that conversation, then it should be self-sustaining. And so whatever increase will get us to there. Like we don't need to make money on it, but I don't think we should be losing money on them, particularly, the preschool and the, but the bus fee, again, like if we want to have that conversation, we can certainly have that about whether or not we want to subsidize that for families and build that into our operating budget. But certainly for the other two, whatever percentage it is to get us to zero.
Yeah,
That's sort of how I
I
feel.
mean, the buses, we'd be charging $1,000 a kid or something astronomical, right?
We're currently subsidized, but I guess the way you could look at it is some buses are obligatory, others are
Right,
not.
right.
So we would have to parse out which ones are not, and that's kind of complicated. So we've taken a very simplified approach in Westwood of charging a flat bus fee, regardless of grade level, regardless of location, as long as you're eligible for the bus, this is the bus fee. So there's value in the simplicity, but I hear you about like there are some students who we're not obliged to provide a bus for, and we currently provide a bus for, by law anyway. Westwood would not have to provide a bus for them, but our school committee policy also dictates that we provide buses for students by zone and within certain walking distances. So that's what we follow, and we're.
Yeah, transportation and athletics will never be self-sustaining. There's always going to be a budgetary impact on both of those.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, I think what I'm sort of hearing though is if transportation costs are going up by X%, then the fee should go up by X%. So at least that ratio is steady.
Or at least we look at it, right?
Yeah.
Transportation costs have increased astronomically, and maybe we don't pass the full, increase on to the families, but at least look at the numbers, right? And not just say 3%, no matter what. And look at sort of the practical implications of what that means and what that increase looks like.
Yep. Our bus contract has gone up by more than 3%, I can tell you that.
Right.
So that's
Right,
that's
and we know
real.
that was
Yeah.
one of the, the driving forces in the budget for the past few cycles. So,
Yeah. Okay. And preschool tuition, thoughts on that one?
I think that one would be interesting to look at, because there's a market
And
outside
that's
that one.
marketable,
Yeah,
right.
that one, I think there's a market. So if we're with market, great, but if we're actually subsidizing it, then that one, there is a market, outside, right?
yeah, I think extended day in preschool, we can look at market
Yeah,
rates.
yeah.
I think for bus and athletic fees, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, and I also want to, like with preschool, again, that is not entirely self-sustaining because we have the obligation for students on IEPs,
IEPs.
right, who are 3 and 4 years
Yeah.
old. So we want to make sure that it's sustaining for the neurotypical students who are in
Yeah.
preschool, but
Of course.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Is it?
Yeah.
Or did we look
No,
at
it is. It is. We have to come forward with something in our
Yeah.
next presentation, so that's helpful. Thank you.
And I think that's all that I have this evening.
So we're moving on to action items.
And I think it's just minutes.
Great. Can I have a motion to approve the November 14th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed, thank you. And is there any new business that anybody would like to bring up?
I have one quick question.
Great.
I thought this year we were going to do a guidance review. Are we doing that?
Yes, we are hoping to start in the new year, getting Amy, Principal Davenport, and Caroline Higgins, and wrapping around what that's going to look like and what the process is.
Okay.
We didn't have it on the agenda today, but we actually have 2 other reviews that are going to be starting up in the new year, and so one of my tasks is to be asking for a school committee member who would like to be part of any of those. But we wanted to get a little bit further along in thinking about what are the dates, what's the commitment, what are we asking for in the spring of this year and heading into next year.
What are the other two? Remind me. I'm sorry.
Visual arts and performing arts.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I just wanted to apologize for being a few minutes late, but you all missed an incredible choir concert.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody for their flexibility in rearranging schedules to make it work for everybody's activities, and that's appreciated, so thank you. And nothing else? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.